Hello friends, welcome to the Wednesday show. Today we're going to talk about how to set correctly a table saw to do safe and efficient woodworking. So regardless of the table saw that you have, regardless if it is very expensive or an entry-level model like mine, there are some pieces that your table saw will have regardless. One of them is the fence, and that is used for reaping. And while it is very useful, it is also what makes the table saw dangerous, because this is what really makes the wood and the blade bind and causes kickback. The other thing is deciding your cut. I have the saw here, and you don't need that. I will show you several ways to do it, but I do have an electronic meter, and as you see I'm just under 45. Can you see the numbers? Just 0.05 off, so that's pretty good for a 45-degree angle. But let's see, can we do it without and this is a device that allows you to measure angles in any possible way. It's a neat little device. It has magnets on each side, so it can be used right or left, and all you do is zero it when you put it on your saw on the 90 degree, and then that will very accurately tell you the angle that you have your saw. But what if you don't have one of these, and most people clearly will not? Well, here where our trusty square comes again. Most saws, if not all saws, always tilt one way, and this is this way that we're doing here. And so by taking your square and putting it into your blade, and you might need to come this way, and I don't know if you will see it or not, but as you can see, can you see it?
Yeah.
We have a very good angle there that is measured by the square without having very fancy equipment. So your square is a very good way to measure. The same way you can just use the square to see if your blade is up. Also, another thing that you can do, and this will be even easier with a smaller square, or put your square in the side to see if your blade is actually warped or not. Can you see between there? I mean, you want the space here not to change as you switch the blade, because if it is changing, that means that your blade is warped. And of course, having the 90 degree is an easy way to use your square to make sure that's a 90 degree. And also, if you go to both edges of the blade, the front and the back edge, you're making sure that the blade is not warped. This is a neat little tip, because if your blade was warped, then one of the two edges would be off square. So in my case, as you can see, I'm square there, I'm square there, and I'm square here. So what are the problems that you can encounter? When you set your fence, it's not working. Everyone is talking about kickback, and here's the interesting thing. As the blade turns, and make sure when you do where I do that now, the saw is not plugged in, so it will not come on and hurt me. But as you see, the blade comes towards you, which means that it pushes the whatever you cut initially down, which is why when you're using a sled, kickback is not a concern, because the sled does not allow the wood to bind to anything. Binding can only happen between the blade and the wood you're trying to cut. And you see, if for some reason I'm tighter, if I'm not completely, and I'm going to exaggerate it, but if I'm not completely straight, you see that my fence now puts pressure in the blade, and the way the blade moves, because the wood is already cut, it is more likely to kick it back. Does that make sense? What I just said? So there are many ways to make sure. One of them is, if you have a piece already, the dimension you want to cut, both for having an accurate cut and for preventing kickback, use your piece as a measure. Just put your piece there, and you know now that your next piece will be cut the correct dimension. And you see this moves freely, and that's an important thing. This piece of wood moves freely, which means that we have the right dimension. Of course, even though generally I advocate not using a tape, it's always a good idea when you first set the saw for your cuts, especially if you have a lot of cuts to do and they will require repetitive dimensions that are the same. Use your blade. This happened to be 3.5, and this is totally accidental, it makes no difference, but it should be 3.5 on the back of the blade too. And as you see, it isn't, because I intentionally did it wrong to start with, right? So now we're at 3.5. Can you see? Mm-hmm. So now I can lock it. Again, check it again in the front. Oh, it is at 3.5. And as you can see, now we're sure that here we're not going to get any binding and we're not going to damage the blade. One of the sure signs that something is wrong is you're going to hear the saw laboring. You're going to hear a change in sound that the motor makes, and also pushing the piece through the blade will become harder. You're going to see burn marks on the piece as you cut it. For example, you see here this cut is perfectly clean, there are no burn marks or anything. That is because there was no pressure on the piece, the blade was perfectly straight when I cut it, and there was no reason to have burn marks. The blade did not have to work hard. Another piece of advice that I know I've said many times is lower the blade to be just about half a tooth above the size of your piece. So for this piece we want to be right about there, and you can feel it with your hand, you know, because that way both you can eliminate, not really eliminate, but reduce the kickback likelihood, but also you don't have the blade working as hard because less of the surface of the blade is coming in contact with the wood. If as you move on you start feeling resistance, stop. Clearly your fence is not correctly set and you're pushing it towards a blade that is closer, which means that it is going to cut a thinner piece and also possibly kick it back and injure you. And I don't know if I have a piece that it is poorly cut to show you a burn. This is a little bit, it is not horrible, but you can clearly see a burn mark here. So if you compare the two pieces, you see here you have on the top you have very clear cut of the grain, and on the bottom you see a little bit of a burn mark. That can become very extreme and actually can turn totally black. If it is totally black, then you're really off on your blade and you are in danger of having kickback. So look at your pieces as you cut them and making sure that you're not going to encounter kickback. And also, this is how you can burn your saw. If your fence is not totally parallel to the table, to the blade, that is a way that you can actually get it burned. And this is where a sled becomes invaluable. And I'm going to bring my sled up for just a moment and you're going to see what I mean. Now as you see with the sled, I don't need the fence because I have a positive way to hold the piece here and I can move my piece Again, you have to account for the thickness of the sled, and you need to come up to where you can cut your piece clearly. But as you see, there is no way that I'm going to have kickback, because as I cut the wood gets freed and there is nothing to make the wood move, especially if I clamp it. But the sled is a very, very safe way to use your table saw, and I very strongly recommend it. If you make your first jig, a sled for cross-cutting on a table saw is probably the first jig you should build. Or if you have only one jig, this should be the jig that you will build. And I'm going to put somewhere up here the link of building this sled and how this is a multifunction sled actually. I've built it in a way that very easily I can modify it to cut 45-degree angles. And if you're interested, again, I'm going to put the link up here to see that. So, of course, always practice safely. When you work with a saw, make sure that you have eye protection, your goggles on, and make sure that you are clear from the blade. In my saw, my sled, I've placed a thickness of wood here, so the blade has to be, don't know if you want to go both directions. See, I'm well within the blade. In other words, I've totally cut the wood by the time the blade will start appearing. And that offers a level of protection. Also, you need to hold it this way, so you're not going to be close to the blade. And if you want to cut small pieces, don't put your fingers very close. Either hold them using a stick or something else, using a clamp, but never put your fingers very close to the blade, because you never know what can happen. So this was the tutorial on using a table saw. And again, it makes no difference if you have a very expensive table saw or a basic one like mine. If you can afford the stop saw, I definitely recommend it. That is the saw that if the blade is moving, simply by touching it, the blade will stop. It is a very, very safe saw. It costs a lot of money, unfortunately, but it makes it a much safer tool to use without you having to worry about damaging your fingers. I hope you enjoyed this episode of how to use your table saw. And if you did, we're going to make some more for other tools. And also, if you did, smash that like button. If you didn't, the other button works as well. Share, subscribe, and definitely let us know what you want to see in our channel. And thank you. We're already above 720 some subscribers, so we'll continue to grow in a very good pace. And I was planning to announce a giveaway this week for the 800, but I will announce it probably next week what will it be. But we're going to definitely have a giveaway, so since we hit 700 much quicker than I anticipated, any video that you like during the month of September, as long as you're a subscriber, will put you in the running for the giveaway for the 600 subscribers. So, a little incentive for you to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching us. We'll see you on Sunday with another build or home project. And take care. Hopefully you had a great long holiday weekend. See you later.